So today's video is of course looking at some of the best reward vehicles or tanks that are locked by having to complete a ton of missions, and we're going to be seeing why they are so overpowered, how players can take advantage of them, and of course come away with results that we're going to be seeing in today's video. So hopefully you guys find something interesting, you find it useful, and you can use it to your own advantage, to either grind your way towards these vehicles, understand how they work, how they play, how you might be able to counter such things, even if they are supremely powerful in a lot more positions than some of your tech tree vehicles. But we're going to have a look straight away at the Chieftain, which is the first vehicle, and we all know about the Chieftain. It is one of the most annoying and infuriating vehicles to come up against because of the fact that if it gets hulled down, if it's capable of being able to be left to its own devices, these tanks are ridiculously strong. They have unbelievable power potential and carry capacity within World of Tanks. And yes, and that sounds very convoluted, but essentially these vehicles have of course got the advantage of being able to have good DPM, they've got good accuracy, they have super good turrets, although you can pen the cupola. You do have the typical British lower plate which you can pen underneath, but it's got very good hull armor on the top plate. You can be penned by high premium rounds, or high premium round penetration guns, but for the most part it's very difficult for opponents to really do a whole lot, and it means that they have to a lot of the time overcommit and just go for you and simply just take you out of the game. And I mean, you're seeing here a Super Conqueror having to trade with this vehicle. Not only is the Super Conqueror supposed to do the exact same role as the Chieftain, in which you can get on a ridge line and you basically just tell the opponents to stuff it, but unfortunately with the Super Conqueror you've got a lot of weak points. The turret has a lot more weak points that you can pen on it. You have the mantlet, you've got the cupola on the top of the vehicle which can be penned, and of course you've got the problem of, even if you do try and side scrape with the vehicle, the engine deck can be penned from the front if you can manage to just get slightly above it. You can see the engine, which I mean, it's just always fun. And of course, being an American vehicle and a British vehicle, both of them love getting their ammo racks taken out because British and American tanks, and having a huge hull apparently just means ammo racks. But either way, this game you've just been seeing the Chieftain do exactly what this tank can do. It has the higher alpha, it's got 440 over a lot of the other heavies at this tier, which make it super strong and just annoying to play. And when you start farming up lower tier vehicles, it's basically that they have barely any capacity to do a whole lot against you. Now, yes, I know that if you jump in as a brand new player and you start playing the Chieftain, you're still going to be doing bad, but there's a reason why this tank, even as an average win rate, has a huge win rate difference between this and the standard tech tree vehicles. And although some of it is down to the fact that in order to actually get the tank you basically have to be a decent player, and that is obviously going to skew it, you do find yourself seeing good players playing in a great vehicle as a bit of a problem, and it means that not even the kind of standard players are going to find themselves in this vehicle, which means you end up with this problem where in this game there wasn't another Chieftain on the enemy team, and that means that you've then got a really good overpowered vehicle on one team, and then you're replacing it on the opposite side or matching it up against tanks that just are not on the same level, and it's just causing that massive imbalance. It's why people really hate seeing these things in the game. And it is a case of sometimes you just have to commit against them. They are not unbelievably overpowered if you find them one-on-one in the open. It's when they just basically get hulled down, and when you can find these things where they can basically just trade one for one with you and you're in a similar sort of heavy, which is why this is such a big problem within World of Tanks. And of course with the hold down meta that we have in World of Tanks right now, where fapping on a ridge line just basically tells your opponents to go and stuff it, I mean, it just becomes a huge problem. And you can see here the TVP having troubles to actually pen the Chieftain. I mean, he does land one, but it's a case of he's now fired his shells and he's got to do something against the Chieftain, and the best thing to do in most scenarios like that is try and run, but you can only run for so long in a game until eventually there's nowhere left to run. and that is where the Chieftain just mops up damage in the late games. And you're seeing here the pattern, obviously knowing that the Chieftain needs to be gone, but takes 1600 damage from him and his teammates, and yeah, not the ideal play. It would probably been better for him to actually have come from the backside and try and go around that way, and that way you could have found what else was back here, the 268 V4 and the Gorilla 15, etc. But yeah, a shot actually lands onto the Chieftain there, which is very, very surprising. But you know, for the most part, tank is very, very good. It's got a super good armor for a tier 10 heavy tank. It has just the gun that's perfect, and I feel like a lot of players just hate this thing entirely. But, you know, there's one key thing that you can do against a Chieftain, and that is essentially just try and flank it. It is the only real weak point of this vehicle. If you find it on a hill or somewhere, it's just trying to single these ones out by using your game knowledge rather than just your pure tank that you're going to be playing in, and that's really the only way you can come about these. But it is surprisingly difficult considering all of the players are typically much better, and that's why you're seeing games like this where a Chieftain at the end of the game is just able to mop up even more damage. And you can see here great use of the bush mechanics coming back and using the 440 alpha to just rip apart the last couple of opponents. So yeah, I mean, from here we can just speed it up. It's just a case of yeah, essentially ripping through these tanks. They really don't have much of a choice. One thing that you see here is that he's making sure to keep all kind of lines open, and also keep himself far enough back that when they're looking up the slope they can only see the turret, which is something a lot of players don't realise. And yeah, sometimes you just have to overcommit and just go for a Chieftain. And I'm not talking about YOLO, but it does need to be done sometimes, where you and your teammates take the initiative and just farm up the damage. And here you go, an easy game in the Chieftain, made even easier by the fact that this was obviously a skilled player and he knew what he was doing in a tank that is borderline OP, and ends up actually getting himself taken out there because yeah, the wreck of the 430. Yeah, but yeah, a brilliant game, of course. But let's talk about some of the other vehicles, because, you know, I'm sure you'll have some comments in the comment section down below about these ones. So let me know what you think. And of course, if you're enjoying it so far, make sure to subscribe and like the videos. It massively helps me out. Now, the next tank on the list is, of course, the Object 260, the mission vehicle that you have to grind out to be able to get. And of course, some of those requirements to be able to complete the missions are very difficult, allowing yet again this elitist kind of players to be able to pick it up, which makes it more annoying, because then you end up with matchups where, you know, one team gets one and the other team gets something like, you know, I don't know, a 705A for example, which is a brilliant matchup between the two vehicles. Very much the same power level, very much the same sort of tank. Yeah, I mean, this is a 60 kilometers an hour vehicle. I'm sure you know, if you've been playing World of Tanks for any length of time, this one is definitely interesting. So let me know what you think about this. Is it as overpowered as some people make out on YouTube? I think we're just going to be talking about how this one actually plays in the game, the sort of playstyle it is. It's very much that heavy medium playstyle where it has brilliant armor for what it is. It has a really solid top speed, 60. You're then also kind of that hybrid between an IS-7 and something like an IS-4, to be honest with you. And that makes this very powerful. You do get the ability to go hold down. You have just some brilliant stats with this tank. And that really makes it a trouble for a lot of the opponents you'll be coming up against. And although this one is available for everyone, at least you can actually get this one if you play the game. It will take a lot more skill to be able to get it. This is the sort of problem that I find. Really, when you think about game balance, you should really be giving, you know, the top players that complete these missions and stuff like that, the kind of more balanced premiums or more balanced reward vehicles, but unfortunately wargaming going in the complete opposite direction and giving them some of the strongest tanks in the game, making them very good, and why the top page of all of the replay sites are essentially just filled with Chieftains, 279Es, with Object 260s, 907s, all of these amazing vehicles that are played by obviously amazing players as well, there's no doubt about that. But it's just a bit of a mess, and as wargaming continuously add these sorts of tanks, we see it with premium tanks. It just creates this massive power creep, and it's why you end up with the game being in such a crappy state in terms of its premium tanks and just tanks being overpowered and more overpowered. Back in the day, they used to give one vehicle like one really good stat and the rest would be kind of mediocre. You'd have one terrible stat that kind of sucks about it. I mean, look at the CDC, for example, a vehicle that had the top speed, it had, you know, the ability to mobilize around the map, but it had some massive drawbacks. You see it with the original Super Pershing. It was slower, it had the armor, but, you know, wasn't particularly OP whatsoever, and really only got the armor when you compared it to some of the other tanks at the tier. Unfortunately, we've gone the other way. It seems like they give them one bad thing and the rest are awesome or really good, and yeah, it definitely makes for games like this, and also for players to take advantage of them, exploit them, come away with results that probably shouldn't be possible, but, you know, anything's possible in a multiplayer game online. So yeah, I mean, you know how it is. But I'm really interested, and I wanted to make this video because I wanted to see what your guys' opinion of these vehicles are. Am I kind of overbaking it? Is it just not that bad? I mean, anyone can play really well in any tank in the game. It's just that some tanks are better statistically, which makes it easier for you to have results, and whether that should be the case in terms of these elitist vehicles, ones that only a small proportion of people are able to get, is yeah, definitely one that is a conversation point, and I'd definitely be interested to see what your comments say, and I'll be replying to as many as I can so that you guys can ask any questions that you might have. But what you see here, 7,000 damage, just controlling the hill, your typical play on Malinovka to be able to have the impact in a heavy tank. Obviously not trying to push down too far, making sure to keep hold down from the TDs that are camping in the forest. You don't want to be getting hit, making sure that he's placing this vehicle, the Foch 155, in the direction and line of where those TDs are, so it makes it a lot harder for them to be able to get a shot. You're seeing there the T-54E1 is in the back somewhere trying to get a few rounds, and yeah, I mean, it just feels like seal clubbing at this point, but obviously at tier 10 when you're playing up against things like the 705A, which yeah, I mean, an okay tank in its own right if you can get into the right sort of matchup and in some maps, but for the most part on the generic maps in the game it is a bit of a struggle. But you're seeing here 260 being able to just rinse her opponents, and this is exactly what the tank does, and why this reward vehicle is kind of just one of those that I'm sure lots of people hate to see in the game. Now, it's probably not as overpowered, but in any way, shape or form as the Chieftain and stuff like that, because there are a few kind of blaring points with this tank that can be a little bit bad, which is essentially that if it angles its armor, you can pen this bit here. If you angle that way, you can pen this plate. You've got the lower plate, which can be penned. You do have a cupola, which is possible to be penned, but I mean, it's quite small, and of course if it's using its gun depression, I mean, good luck trying to hit that one. So yeah, I mean, it is just a solid vehicle that has the good gun stats that you'd expect from something that is kind of one of the more OP tanks in the game. But I think we've talked a lot about the 260. It's essentially from this point just a farm up of all of the people, not overcommitting on Malinovka, and essentially just getting in as many shots as possible to come away with a fantastic result. And of course, no surprise there when you combine the good player and the great tank to have a result like this. And I mean, over 10k already, and it's just pushes through to get as much damage as possible, and essentially using all of the key spots like here to be able to push, making sure to keep the building here to avoid you from being spotted, and of course getting shot from this bush right here, which is basically where all the campers go. There you go, a tree falls down, there's going to be someone in here, takes a little bit of time to get in here, gets this wreck which could provide some cover. Leopard, WZ, they're all over now, and it's just spotting heaven at that point. So really good play here. I mean, using all of the traditional positions, going in for the ram because, you know, it weighs an absolute ton or multiple tons and goes 60 kilometers an hour, so it has the ramming potential as well. So yeah, it's just a very, very powerful tank, and I think that everybody knows it. Everyone knows what sort of these tanks are all about. You can see here managing to keep up with a Manticore because, yeah, heavy tank. Either way, very, very good one. and I'll be interested to see what you guys think. So let's jump into the next one, which isn't so overpowered, but yeah, a bit more of an interesting talking point as well, and some tanks that maybe are a little bit more kind of what you'd expect from these reward vehicles. Now, this next replay is one I wanted to add because it's a case of a vehicle that I think Wargaming kind of got right in how it actually plays in game, and how you could potentially make vehicles like this. Maybe not when it first came out, when it had the OP side weak point that got basically removed from the Panzer 7, but this one being the tank that is essentially a Panzer 7 but gets a 15cm that's capable of dealing 750 instead of the 560 that you get with the Panzer 7 itself, allowing you to really act almost like an E100 that can side scrape and have slightly better turret armor, albeit you do have the weak points, which we can see here, which are essentially this point and of course this point when they do try and come towards you, which are kind of annoying when you're really close and they're kind of wiggling side to hit, but they are still weak points that you can pen, and of course the Mantler is also a potential weak point here and here, but either way, the Panzer 7 and this tank, you know, they are similar sort of tanks. They play similarly to how you'd expect them to play, which is where I think Wargaming go wrong with making these reward vehicles. And yes, I'm sure there are cases where, you know, some tanks need to be different from ones that are already in the game, otherwise you just end up with, you know, reskinning tanks constantly and having the exact same ones, making it a little bit boring. But Wargaming could definitely take from this and learn from it, where they can make these kind of variations of the same tanks that are essentially just offer you something different. It's a bit more limited edition, as opposed to just being a tank that is very, very powerful, very strong, and just borderline OP that we see with some of the other vehicles and some of the other reward vehicles in the game, and why, you know, you end up with tanks like the 279E that are very good. I mean, they are realistic tanks. They were designed, or at least prototyped, a lot of the vehicles that come into World of Tanks, which is why World of Tanks make them, other than, you know, some of the random designs that they come away with in some cases. But at the same time, it does have to be a game, you know, that feels like it's not just completely out of your control, and making more and more OP premiums does make the game worse. And what Wargaming are going to find in the end with making so many tanks like this is that they just feed people so many OP premiums that every single new one has to be better than the previous one, otherwise it just doesn't sell as well. And the more that Wargaming do it, the more problems it causes, and then eventually they're just going to run out where it's just a case of, oh well, we've got to do something here because, you know, we've essentially made all of the new tanks overpowered. The tech tree ones aren't so overpowered, and we're going to have to do something, and that's where they'll probably end up introducing tier 9 premium tanks that reward you with silver, where they'll probably start introducing tier 10 premium tanks that reward you with silver, and just make them that way. Now you're seeing here the FV doesn't manage to pen, and that's because the armor does hold up a little bit. Now if he'd aimed properly, he probably could have penned, but you know, FV struggling as always. But either way, this tank, very good mix of what you can expect when Wargaming don't just go all out and make a super OP tank, even if in the beginning it was very, very strong, but it gives you something a little bit of different, and I think these are the sorts of tanks that we'd love to see in World of Tanks, or at least that's what I would. Now whether you take the VKK as being a very OP vehicle or a tank that is ridiculously strong, I don't know, and I did do a full review of this vehicle in its own dedicated vehicle tank review, so you know, you can have a look at that if you're interested. I'll link it in the pinned comment in the description, so if you're interested in checking out this tank in its entirety, then you can do so there. But it's just a very, very good one, and I think that that's where Wargaming go wrong, is that sometimes you don't have to make so many OP premiums. Yes, they might not sell, but you know, sometimes it's very, very good, and in the long run you'll end up selling more. So yeah, I think that it makes the game health better. You end up introducing the ability for players that just would not have paid any money, because the fact that they find it difficult to actually play the game because of all of these sorts of tanks, to actually be able to play the game and enjoy it a little bit more. Now whether we've gone past the point of no return where they can't actually make it any better because they've already introduced too many, I don't know, but hopefully this video has given a little insight as to my own actual thoughts on it and the sorts of things that you guys can keep an eye out for in the game. And mainly I want to see what your reaction is as the community, and yeah, hopefully this video goes down well. You can see here just a brilliant expert play of the VKK, and I think that's pretty much the tank. I mean, from here it's just a case of typical heavy tank game where it just blitzes through the opponents in this sort of location and just wins the game, or at least goes up 1v4 against a lot of the opponents, which is nice to see. And yeah, it's just a case of farming up as much damage as you can using the 750 alpha that this gets over the standard Panzer 7, side scraping and just causing chaos amongst the 45%ers in the enemy team. So yeah, the Death Star really not having fun, and he manages to deal with the UDES there, perfect one. Obviously you want to go for the tank that can get around the back of you and start farming you, rather than the one that yes has the alpha but is probably not that bad. Sets him on fire, easy dubs, and now it's just going towards the artillery using the speed that is lackluster on this, but you know, super heavy and all of that, and essentially finds that little 261 who's trying to run away like the little rat he is, but can't run away for too long, and 13k damage later. Fantastic replay in the VKK, and hopefully you did enjoy this video. Let me know what you think, and of course like the video if you did, and check out some of the other ones that we have on the channel where we discover new ways to play the game, tips and stuff like that that hopefully will help you get better. Sorry this one wasn't a tips video or a guide, but I really wanted to just chat about the state of the game and of course reward tanks in particular. Let me know your thoughts, and I'll see you in the next one, hopefully. Goodbye.